Do you think your memory is getting worse? You try to focus, get distracted, it seems like you can't concentrate. You've never had doubts, have you? Could it be that you have ADHD? Sometimes a restlessness and impulsivity. Or on the other hand, don't you think it's nonsense or even an excuse for so many people who now claim to have ADHD, suddenly to say that they can't do something, that it didn't work out for this or that, or with those little excuses? Like, no, just to get a prescription? What do you think about that? That's exactly what we're going to talk about today in the podcast episode. This podcast, which is DignaMente, because no one was made to live here on earth without mental health. It's very difficult to live with dignity, to live dignifiedly, if you don't have health up here. And today, God has prepared this distinguished guest here.
Happiness, it's an honor to be here with you.
It's not possible that you don't know him. You'll have to look him up on social media now. This here is Simon, neurodivergent psychopedagogue, someone who has suffered firsthand terrible difficulties for not being diagnosed at the right time, having some controversial treatments. What ended up happening because of that? And instead of taking on a victim's role like, oh my God, my family rejected me, and so on, he went there, turned things around, didn't give up, and today he has the community of, and seeing people divergent with more than 30,000 students who are, with each passing day, suffering less from this type of problem. There is a clinic that provides access, that democratizes not only the issue of education for those who suffer, psychoeducation for those who suffer from psychiatric conditions, but quality access at an affordable price.
I like to say that it's more than the prices that are truly affordable. When we talk about price, sometimes people say things like that, but in reality, we know how expensive mental health still is in Brazil. Exactly. And quality service. And for me, it's an honor to be here. You know, man, it really is an honor. I'm happy, man. You say that those who don't know, but who doesn't know you, right? Yeah, but let's go.
Yes, I know a bit about your story, but those who are just coming now need to know more. And they're on Instagram, where you do an amazing job, but those are those little 1.5-minute videos. You can't really go in depth, right? Perfect. How about this thing of that you suffered before, neurodivergent? What's the difference? What would be the opposite of neurodivergent? And among the main types, where do you fit in? The neurodivergent is the strange guy, the abnormal one, the disturbed one.
I find it strange who is normal, you know? Those who are too normal to me are too strange. I don't like normal people. I like crazy people. When I say crazy, it's not in a pejorative sense. I have the right to speak here. I am really crazy. But jokes aside, the neurodivergent is the one who diverges. Diverges in brain functioning. We have a different functioning from other people. And why are we considered strange? Because everything that is not within a standard, if I grow up my whole life, I look at the people around me. The people around me are like a user manual. The people you interact with, your family, at your school, the standards, they give you an operating manual. So if I look at this manual, I don't function. According to the manual, the wrong one, the strange one, the alien is me. So the life of a neurodivergent person who has a different neurological functioning is the life of someone who always looks at others, at the external, at the standard functioning, and diverges from that. They function differently. And we suffer. We suffer because we live in a world that wasn't made standardized for people like us. And then in reality, we spend a lifetime trying to fit in and adjust in a world that wasn't made, wasn't structured. And when I say that the world wasn't made, wasn't structured, I'm talking about work relationships. I'm talking about the school environment. I'm talking about manners and codes of conduct where we really have difficulty meeting these expectations. And the issue is that society looks at us. It doesn't expect me to act like a neurodivergent person. it expects me to act like someone who doesn't suffer from a disorder. So, when society looks at someone with ADHD, for example, it doesn't look at the ADHD. Expecting that many times they might lose attention, that they might regulate themselves emotionally, it acts expecting us to meet expectations as if we didn't have a disorder. So many times I might be working in a company, right? And I also have bipolar disorder. It doesn't mean we're going to talk about it. Bipolar isn't someone who changes their mind. That's not it. But I have moments in episodes when today I am regulated, medicated, thank God. But I have moments when I am in a depressive phase of bipolar disorder where I can't get out of bed, where I feel pain in the body joints. And there are moments when I am at the top of the roller coaster. And I hardly sleep because I am hyper-productive with a million ideas, and I'm sure I'm going to solve humanity's biggest problem. So, people can't look at how we function and try to understand. So many times I've been in situations where I worked and people acted in a way. They treated me and expected me to act in a way as if, for example, I am a difficult person to live with.
Yes. So the fact that someone knows they are neurodivergent doesn't bring much peace to their life, does it?
No, it doesn't.
Because even though society has evolved today in terms of inclusion, the expectation of the majority is, man, that's cool. Seriously, poor thing. But do this here that you have to do just like me.
Exactly. It's not that it doesn't bring peace. Today it brought me peace, Felipe. Because, can I talk about Felipe, right? You can, no problem. Today it brought me peace. Because today I understood how I function. And today I bear the cost of functioning the way I do. Like, there are people who won't like it. And for me, that's perfectly fine. Today I have the maturity to know how to carry the burden of having a unique way of being. Because that's where the detail lies. And I sometimes talk about this, and sometimes people don't understand it very well. Because having the maturity to carry the burden, to suffer. When I say burden, folks, it's not about victimhood, okay? If there's one thing I'm not, it's a victim. I used to be, but not today. When I talk about the burden of carrying the weight of a disorder, it's because, yes, you will face prejudice. Yes, people won't understand you. And here's the detail. I don't have to force them to understand me because they really won't understand. They might maybe understand more, glimpse, but they don't accept that they understand very well. Because like, I can understand that you have some emotional violations, but if you're here in the company with someone, you're out. Understand? And then it's very interesting because people act with you as if you wouldn't lose balance at times. They use your vulnerability and they expect you to act differently. So yes, there is a weight. That's why we have to be careful. And when I talk about paying the price and having maturity of carrying the weight and diagnosis, it's because many people today, when they talk about having a disorder, they are not speaking to be understood. They speak simply to be justified and accepted for the first time. They don't speak because, like, I want our relationship to improve. In reality, accept me because I have been rejected so much the way I am my whole life, and now I want you to accept me. I'm not criticizing because I've done this myself, but we have to be careful not to fall into this path because this path does not bring peace. This path, quite the opposite, puts me in a situation where I become codependent on the person, where I often end up in a situation of suffering abuse from people above, from authority, because these people can often use your flaws, your regulations against you. Do you understand? So you need a lot of maturity to bear the weight of a disorder. Because bearing the weight of a disorder means that every day you end up having to prove. And it's not that you have to prove, but you show that you can indeed function differently and achieve results. Yes, many people look and say, but how are you going to be a business person, work in politics, and do various things if you're just a person? Yes, I can do that. But people think we can't. For example, I have a clinic, as you mentioned, and I heard from people who work nearby who joined the operation and asked, and I'm not criticizing these people, but just so you understand, they asked, but can he attend the meetings we have? Then I looked and thought, what do you mean, can he? But isn't he bipolar? Isn't he going to freak out on someone in the middle of the meeting? Wow. Do you understand? So look at this. I am the founder of the company, but even so, people have this perspective. So there is a prejudice that we must indeed increasingly bring psychoeducation to people and break. And yes, we need to improve the way to be able to provide working conditions, schooling for these people. But on the side of those who are neurodivergent, my friend, you have to have the maturity to deal with your diagnosis. Because I could very simply, Felipe, quickly look and say, no, because I can. That's prejudice. But no, I have to look at the person, say this, breathe. Also understand that she doesn't understand absolutely anything and show her that, yes, I am a person who has a disorder, but I know how to sit. I'm not someone who sits in a meeting and regulates myself. I know how to position myself. I know what the places are and my qualities to be able to perform. So functioning in a different way in a society that wasn't made for you and where the norms of society aren't made for you leads you to have a level of maturity, of not wanting to impose your way of being, but to recognize your potential, where you can perform, where you can be good, where you can make a difference and ride that wave. And have the maturity to hear certain things that will displease you. And that's the point. It's all good. Let it go. And show that you can overcome this by being the way you are. Not by being the way they expect you to be.
Wow, man. That's really good, very real. People ask, doctor, how do you like spending the whole day talking, reading, listening to these things? These crazy people talking, you have no idea how boring normal people are.
They are boring indeed.
So, but this issue of peace, I've seen a lot of this in the office, really. People who came wanting to convince their father, mother, boss that they were capable of doing something. And indeed, when they had the diagnosis, they treated it, improved. But it was frustrating because there was no recognition from the outside.
Always from the family. Did you understand what I said?
So this peace is not external, it is internal.
No, exactly.
It is internal.
When people want to shout to the whole world that they have ADHD, bipolar disorder, their shout. It is valid. I'm not saying it isn't. My shout was valid. But we have to understand that this shout must come from a place of maturity. Yours, because it can't just be the shout of a spoiled child who simply wants to stomp their feet to be heard. Do you understand? Because then people will look and continue to place you in a position of marginalization, of prejudice, of discrimination.
And the search for respect from others often leaves you vulnerable and leads you to disrespect yourself.
Exactly. And that's what happens. We often end up putting ourselves in situations of humiliation, of abuse.
I know you came from the countryside of Paraná.
No, actually, I'm from Rio de Janeiro.
Oh, really? Yes.
I'm from inside System, roundabout.
Roundabout.
But Paraná was for attending college in Paraná.
And so within the context of your family, whether it's Paraná, Toby, Vor, Paraná, or from Rio, a traditional Brazilian family, how did people understand this? How did they deal with you in the context of family, school, church, which unfortunately sometimes offers support, sometimes punishes? Today, what was that?
Today, the church is the place that, when I say church, I'm not being specific, but I was born and raised in a Christian evangelical church. And from a very young age, I was already playing in the church. Playing what? Violin. Violin. We dedicated ourselves to it from a very young age. And here's the detail. That's where the pressure started. Unnecessary, because I never liked playing the violin. Oh, really? No. Everyone thinks I liked it because I started at 6 years old, but I didn't like it. I played the violin because as I was part of this church, I had to be a musician, and then they forced me to take music lessons. But at the same time, they never let me play soccer. I don't know how to play soccer, and I dreamed of playing soccer. It was a sin. I couldn't have a television at home, but they forced me to play the violin. So since I was 6 years old, I would go to church and play. Guys, what a thing. I was bad, I wasn't good. Then I got good, because if you play for a long time, you improve. But at 6 years old, I was the person who waits, right? A lifetime playing. But no, I was good. But there. because I didn't like it. The teacher would come and I would roll from one side to the other on the carpet. I didn't want to. I would run away. I didn't like it, you know? So I was under that pressure, already having to play the violin because of the church. And at the same time, I would watch the boys playing soccer. I would stand by the fence and couldn't play. There was no television in my house to watch cartoons, right? So I grew up being that boy who only went to church in a suit, very shy. This communicative guy you see today, he didn't exist.
Really? Tim?
Didn't exist.
Repressed, poor thing, right?
I was repressed. And the truth is, I always ended up being this child. Who was a child? I lost my father when I was 1.5 years old. So I didn't know my father. And I ended up being this child who was very innocent, a child who suffered a lot from this context and went through a series of situations since my childhood, situations of bullying, physical, psychological, and sexual abuse. So all of this happened to me. So I was a guy who was very afraid of people. I was very afraid of the world. I only lived inside the house alone, playing with toy cars or building something, and I would go play music at church. I played at having little dirt church services. It wasn't the only thing. Alone, I never had a friend. So I grew up as this lonely child.
Until that happened?
That was until I was about 12 years old. I always was. Beginning of adolescence, because then I was vulnerable. And I didn't talk about it. So I would take everything that happened and go to my room, stay quiet. I never talked about it. I went through terrible situations where I never exposed what I went through. And the only thing was to try to seek God, pray and ask. Until one day came this Simon you see today, right? He was a forged Simon. He was a Simon that I built to sheer determination. This Simon didn't exist. I was the one with glasses in school, quiet, shy, a believer who wore a suit, who didn't have a television, who didn't know how to talk about anything, who didn't play soccer, and who was excluded from everyone, didn't have a group of friends, and suffered a lot of bullying. Until one day, in a situation that happened, I was at school, and they put me in a circle of friends, and then they made a joke about me. A joke that had a very significant connotation, and in that joke, I knew that any response I gave would be a trap and would put me in an embarrassing situation. And I remember they started laughing. I left, went into the bathroom, very nervous. And I didn't like going to school. I didn't like leaving the house. I didn't want to be around people because I was ashamed. I was afraid. The world was very hostile to me. But that day I got tired. And then that day I got home, I sat in front of a mirror that was in my house. And I looked and said, "You will never be this guy again. From today on, you will be a different person and you will no longer accept this." I was 12 years old. I was in the 6th grade. And from that day on, I became a communicative guy. I forged this personality of an extroverted, communicative guy, and I started building it. So from that day on, I threw myself into the world in the sense of, I'm going to become the class representative and I will be elected. People will vote for me. So I will ask for votes. I will speak. I will go out. I started to develop this relationship guy of I don't know what, and bam, 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 and bam, bam, bam. And then I went and became the funny guy, the cool guy, the nice guy. And it changed. I flipped this whole personality of today. I became who I am. Everyone looks at my communication and thinks that this communication, you gave up. No, you didn't give up.
So it's not from hyperactivity then?
No, there's also my hyperactive side from ADHD.
But before it was a restlessness.
But before it was just a restlessness. That's right. I was restless in my little world, you know? This guy here, he has a trace of hyperactivity, but he didn't exist. This communicator, this guy who speaks and isn't shy or anything, is the opposite. And people think that no, in reality, I forged this guy so that no one would notice who I was.
You created a role. I created a mask, but it was a role. that was so adapted that it was like a seal. That incorporated into you became part of you. Because they placed a horrible role on you of the repressed, the suppressed. So you had incorporated that role because you couldn't develop. Since the topic is about roles, this is very interesting. Since the topic is the role you play in the opportunity of life that God gave you here on earth, why can't you tear or turn the page of the drama story from the past, take a pen and start writing on a blank page from now on, pin it to your chest and pursue a better present, a better future, right?
Exactly. Today, I look at my journey, I look at my story. I am very proud of it, including everything I've been through, the abuses I've endured. And those situations I went through, they weren't few, they weren't easy. But I am proud of that journey because I understand that everything that happens in our lives, we have to look at as an opportunity. If I always wanted my voice, if I want people to listen to me, I have to have authority in something. And if I don't make the paralyzed walk, that authority will come from my story, from what happened to me. So if today people listen to me about someone who suffers from ADHD, bipolar disorder, chemical dependency, who positions themselves today within mental health, who attempted suicide, if people today look at me and I have this place, it wasn't because I talk about it, because I sat down to study. It was because I went through the valley. I went through it. I lived it. And nothing gives you more authority than your own story. So sometimes we look at the story of Joseph from Egypt. Joseph from Egypt was sold by his brothers. He was a slave. He was falsely accused. He suffered a lot. And then you might look and say, wow, what a bad God, punishing him, a horrible thing. In reality, the brothers threw him away. That's it. And it's very interesting that Joseph thanks the brothers who did that to him, because it was his brothers who led him to his position. So today, I honor my story. I am grateful because it was God's permission. No one is saying it's mandatory. That's not what I'm saying. But I honor my story because to me, the speech, the events that happened in my life, they opened up the possibility for me to decide whether I would take that and transform it into something relevant for my story. Or if I would allow it to bring me down. And I took all of this. And today, if there are people who, when I post a video and talk about my chemical dependency, would listen to me, it's because I lived through the dependency. If I talk about when I attempted suicide, about my difficulties with being fired from jobs, in relationships, the challenges with bipolar disorder, if I tell all of this, if I talk about the bullying I suffered, I speak today as someone they look at and say, man, he went through it. So I needed to go through it. If I hadn't gone through any of this, I wouldn't be sitting here with you today. I wouldn't be in parentheses, okay? Because nowadays it's not about authority, nothing. This is an authority on what I'm talking about. So the story will legitimize. My story legitimizes me to sit where I want to sit. Where I'm sitting?
Your early years of life.
This is not romanticized, folks.
It's not.
For God's sake.
In the early years of life, you didn't say it, but many people would say, wow, my life is crap. And it was crap. But instead of throwing crap into the fan with victimhood, justification, absurd day, you turned it into fertilizer, into a stroob, something different.
Today, I have the maturity to understand this. There were phases in my life where I simply reached consultations in states where I would say, I can't take it anymore. I don't want to go through this. But the big issue is that I'm a Christian, The church often puts us in a position of demonizing the cross. Carry your cross, carry your burden, as if our cross was something bad. No, the cross is not a bad thing. What do you mean the cross is not something bad, Because the cross is where I will fulfill my purpose. What was Christ's vocation? Christ's vocation was to save humanity. But his purpose, how is he going to save humanity?
On the cross, crucified. And even he didn't carry it alone for a time.
Do you understand?
Because he needed to carry that alone.
Do you understand? Exactly. So when they ask me, Sergio, what is your purpose, your vocation? Today I understand that this idea of my purpose, it's a bit mistaken. Because my purpose must always be to do God's will. This is clear to me. When I understand this, vanity falls, ego falls, and you start to trust more. It's very difficult to come to understand this. Because we have the ego to say, my purpose is to help people. Come on, man. That's ego.
I understood it not long ago. Me too.
I was so overconfident that once I indeed went to the church and said, God, I want to know if you approve of my project. And I thought I had asked correctly, but it's not, how can I ask if God approves of my project? It's I who have to accept the project he has for me, regardless of anything. It's wrong just to think, because if he says he doesn't approve, then I get frustrated. Then I get sad. I rebel against God. I blaspheme. I stomp my foot. I cry. Do you understand? But humans, we have the God syndrome, right? Wanting to give God a little help from time to time. The hints, isn't it true? Abraham, God said he would give him a son, and he tried to help God, and he had a son with a concubine, all wrong. He created a mess for God. He didn't trust. So I say this because I also talk about this part. So I understood that my purpose has to be what God has for me. It's just that my vocation, it is at the point to where I look at humanity. And something, because you see, I'm talking a lot about God because you're a Christian, right? So I can speak. But if God converted me, if I believe in him, what could he simply do? He created me. Just take me away all at once. No mistake. If the purpose was just for us to believe and for him to convert us, but why does he leave us here then? It's not in the problem, because we have to solve some issue that's here. So that's why he doesn't take us away. My friend, you are here. You will have to do something. There's something. There's a vocation of yours here that you have to fulfill here. And where do we find our vocation? It's when I look at humanity, fallen, and I look and say, man, what issue within this fallen humanity of flawed man do I get so indignant about that I look and say, only I can solve this? Because Christ came down to fulfill the only one who could solve the issue of saving and forgiving humanity's sin was Christ. He was the only one who could solve that issue.
Jesus was not neurotypical at all at the time. He was very neurodivergent.
You're going here, crazy. And he played several pranks. No one noticed. He is wonderful. I find him very interesting.
Go have a chat with him in heaven like that.
No, for God's sake. So, yeah. My vocation is directly linked to when I see something in humanity. I get so outraged by it that I say, only I can solve this issue.
And usually
that's the thing.
People think they don't have power to change anything.
And I fulfill my vocation by going through the cross. That's where I fulfill it. Then when we fulfill this here, then you can leave. But that's what purpose and vocation mean to me. That became very clear, right? So today, I think my biggest difficulty, and it will always be a big challenge, is for man, right? It's for us to be able to understand this and trust.
Look, until you reach this point, which I find divine, like truly God's providence. You made it clear that you were very hurt. People like the final chapters, right? But there were many difficult chapters there. It's well known through scientific studies that those with attention deficit disorder, with or without hyperactivity, especially with hyperactivity, have it worse, right? Yes, there's a higher risk of hypersexualization, sexual vulnerability, and also involvement with illicit substances, drugs, and such. Did you go through these hells, these sufferings?
All of them. I say that. I have all the comorbidities that untreated disorder can bring. Yeah. Let's go. I suffered from depression, attempted suicide, chemical dependency, and my dependency was on cocaine, right? It's known that cocaine is the drug that releases dopamine. So when I used it, my mind went silent. Instead of I was in silence, that shouting stopped. And then I would look around and I could be more assertive in a completely chaotic environment, people behind me, and so on. I worked with events, and there I was, focused. And then, in that party, club environment, ADHD will make you more impulsive. So you'll try things more easily, right? And when he tries the drug, right, whatever it may be, it ends up acting as a self-medication for the individual who suffers from a disorder like ADHD.
True.
So unlike other people who used it to have fun, I used it to silence my mind. And then the trouble started when this use, which was sporadic at parties, began to turn into something like, I'm extremely tired and exhausted. I need to get home and have my moment of peace. I would sit at home alone and order. I stayed there, calm. And then that became my moment of relaxation, of peace, of silence.
Man, that really messes with a lot of people's heads. You needed for a while to use drugs to stay in.
I used them. That's when I became dependent.
As you lose?
Because then you start losing control.
Guys, not advice.
It's not for you to use, for God's sake. I'm saying that you fall into this cycle.
You're showing the trap.
Yes, I'm showing the trap. I'm not defending it. For God's sake, that was the biggest misfortune of my life.
It's a romance at the beginning, right?
What? It's wonderful, right? If I didn't understand anything, you stay silent. You're there, but you start losing timing because we know how cocaine works today, right? It acts on your dopamine receptors. And more, you need to use more and 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 more.
Not at all.
And a brain exposed to this drug never returns to normal. I could be years without using it. If today I get home, order, and use it, it doesn't regress. No. It's like, let's go back a little bit. No, it continues from where you left off.
Overdose happens to many people.
That's right. And I started using it too much. When I realized I would go 3 days without coming. And here's the detail. When you start being high performance while using,
society validates it.
Exactly.
They don't know why, but man, what are you?
Being high performance. People had no idea because I didn't show it. It's like, if you look at me here, then you think I'm really crazy. I don't know what. I'm just this normal guy. So like, I would go in.
Abnormally normal.
So I would go in, to do my job. They had no idea. And I was there, And then you get into a cycle that you can't get out of. And then you want more and more. And the issue is that a drug addict will only realize that they need help, not when someone reaches out to them, not when someone says it's too much. It's when they're at rock bottom. And if they're at rock bottom and they ask for your help, do you know what you have to do? Throw a little more dirt. What I'm saying is terrible because it's up to them. It's up to them. They have to, yes, it has to be a decision where they understand That's why there needs to be work on psychoeducation, or big work on bringing information to these people so they understand the rock bottom they're in. Because everyone thinks they have control.
A kind of pride comes in. I stop when I want to. I have a little control.
The day I understood this, Dr. Felipe, I was in a consultation with my psychiatrist, and I told him I was already unstable regarding this, but I kept falling back every 45 days. It always happened like that. I would fall and so on, until I went to the consultation and said, "Doctor, I don't want to fall every 45 days anymore. I wish I could stop falling." And he said, "We will have to hospitalize you." When he said that, I looked at him and said, "What? What do you mean, hospitalize me? I'm productive. I deliver. I have results. I'm not someone who goes around doing nonsense. I'm not dependent. No. I have control." And then, when he said that, I understood something. I couldn't. Then I said, "Why hospitalize me? Because you can never use it again." And I said, "What do you mean I can never use it again?" And then I started the argument. I'm productive, I do this, I do that, and blah, 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 blah. And I understood something that I couldn't live with, the possibility and the idea of never feeling that sensation again. It was completely terrifying for me. Now, if you said, on such and such a day, you will set aside for this. I lived 3 months peacefully because I knew that on such and such a day I would feel the sensation. I couldn't live with the idea of never again. And that day I understood what it means to be dependent. That day I understood that I was dependent, because when you said, "You will never use it again," I was completely terrified. I couldn't. It was inconceivable for me to live with this idea of never again. Wait a minute, what do you mean never again? No, for the love of God. That's why when I started attending a Narcotics Anonymous, which I did, and if needed, I still go. I suggest, I recommend. The idea is just for today. It's just today, tomorrow. And then with just for today, I've been for 15 years. I've been for 20 years. Because if I say never again, the dependent person, they can't handle it. They don't follow what idea. And it's not because they are a bum, a junkie, a drug addict. No, it's not because of that. We have to look at chemical dependency as the mental health issue that it is.
It is.
It is. And chemical dependency, it often in neurodivergent people, 40. And there is research that shows that 45% of individuals who suffer from ADHD and bipolar disorder are dependent on cocaine and heroin.
Half, man.
Yes.
That's a lot of people. And there's...
Sorry. 45% are dependent on chemically dependent on a substance. And within this context, 25% in general is on cocaine. Do you understand?
And the substance that brings this
is very serious.
This tension, this focus.
Is there more water, please? This is very serious. So we have to talk about this.
So you, father, mother, right? A father and a mother who are hearing this, thinking that judging the child, stop this. You'll never be able to do this again. Thinking that this is helping.
But at the same time, we have to put them in treatment and manage to make this individual understand and take self-responsibility.
Don't think they will be hurt.
Don't think that you will always be helping, holding their hand, because they will need a process of breaking away, a solitary desert, to be able to flip this. If they don't go through this process, they come back, and they come back, and they come back, and they come back.
And it's very common. Look, I see parents. I also attend to many people with chemical dependency. I only see the extremes, unfortunately.
But it's because the depth, that's exactly it. Dependency. You can only flip it when you reach the extreme. That's what I mean. It's when you almost die. It's when you lose everything. It's when your life has collapsed without you even realizing it. Because a functional dependent will find it very difficult to get out of it because they have everything, they manage to organize everything. And that was my struggle. I was a functional dependent. So I needed to hit rock bottom. I needed to understand this to be able to flip.
But I also see the bad extreme, which is bad just for being bad. Because what you said, I've seen it many times, even within my own family. But unfortunately, and this needs to stop, there are parents who are supposed to provide support, but don't. They just judge, condemn, criticize, and think it's a huge bad faith on the person's part, that it's just nonsense.
My family did that. I love my family, but my family did that.
And on the other hand, there are parents who want to be very nice. They finance and support. And the person only uses at home, thinking they're not harming anyone.
That's it.
And consenting to that. Then there's one of the parents who is the executioner. Then the mother usually, but it's not a rule, defends. And a mother's love. You know how it is, doctor. And this boy is good for nothing, doctor, the father says. And the guy, until he has a controlled opportunity, without putting his life at risk, to reach the chaos of chaos and say, I can't take it anymore, man.
Exactly.
He had an experience, really real, truly. In the family, he really likes you a lot.
Oh, that's great.
Will he know, uncle? You exposed me there. He had a very, very complicated moment in his life. And a prodigy boy, man. Prodigy. Yeah, he's one of the most intelligent in the family, but he's the guy who's nervous about seeing people. He didn't get like cattle colors, those things.
My friend.
He enjoyed skateboarding those things, but his mind would create solutions for things that no one even imagined. Like that. The day when he got into it, and it was hard to get into it without also going into hyperfocus, he would create a masterpiece, a little scary thing. And you have a lot of talent, and so on.
Uh-huh.
But then there came a time when it couldn't be sustained anymore, because the guy who has a lot of talent and buries the talent, he is buried by the talent.
Perfect.
Then he needed to be buried. There was his birthday, and then they captured him there. He was kind of lost there. They managed to capture him.
Huh.
Then everyone was like, oh, it's so good that he's here, and so on. They spoke very difficultly. And celebrating that victory, of having brought him to eat a little cake and such with the family, then everyone went to congratulate him at the time of congratulations. He sat down next to him like this. He said, look, uncle is going to give you a different happy birthday today. You've just entered another year of life. I don't want God to bless you this year, damn it. I want you to have a terrible year that you hit rock bottom. I want it to be the most miserable year of your life, that all the potential you have, you're wasting it. You're fooling everyone, even yourself. But I trust you that when you're at rock bottom, when people start throwing dirt on you, you'll understand something. And the more dirt they throw on someone who's at the bottom of the pit, they forget that you start stepping on the dirt and you begin to climb out of the pit.
That's right.
First God, then in prayer, I asked God to take care of him, I had this intimacy, because it doesn't mean it will work for everyone, but I wish this for him. After some time passed, he said, Uncle, you have no idea how much I wanted to hit you that day.
But it worked out.
But it was the worst year of my life, Uncle. And I understood that there was only one path, that my life was so empty. And I started to seek Jesus. I had an encounter with Jesus. And today he reads the Bible more than I do. He's productive, but he's zero of that. He has ADHD. I used to say, you guys need to take this boy to the doctor, because it's complicated, right? The uncle is...
Yes, man, exactly.
He stopped looking for an escape. But what you're saying is, look, it's real. There are people who are so bad that unfortunately they have to get worse to humble their pride and see that there's only one thing to do from now on, which is to get out of it.
Sometimes it's not even pride, right? Sometimes
blindness, maybe?
It's a blindness. It's because he's so immersed in that situation that he can't see. And as we go, sometimes trying to help in an unconscious way, we end up becoming a collaborator of that dependency, right? Without realizing it. So, in the case of dependency, okay, folks, we're saying that there has to be a lot of care regarding this. But the issue is that individuals who suffer from disorders like ADHD, they are more impulsive. They are hyperactive, right? They have this constant search for novelty, for stimulation. And drugs end up filling all these gaps. And the truth is that a person who suffers from a disorder often, well, they are people who, how can I explain this? But who I am, it ends up being blurred and stained by the symptoms of a disorder.
A confusion of identity with the symptom.
And then I don't know who I am. I am not Simon, who is, I think certain things are me, when in reality they are symptoms.
You get lost, right? So much time in that chaos.
Exactly. So, the only way I can manage, and often we will find these answers, and this relief from the world pressuring me because I don't meet certain expectations, this relief even, due to the substance that silences my mind, is in the drug. And it does become indeed an escape valve. The drug, the dependency, it is often related, it is completely related to traumas. It is related to disorders. People, they see chemical dependency as a lack of responsibility of the person who has it. It's not. Because a person who often doesn't have a disorder and doesn't suffer certain things, doesn't have certain traumas, they might even experiment, but they don't fall into dependency.
It's true. It's not that easy. It's
so easy. You understand? So individuals who, if a person suffers from chemical dependency, let's research, let's analyze, because surely they have something unresolved, some abuse, some trauma, right? And they will certainly have a disorder.
A long time ago, I read a study that talked about,
and I'm not saying this, I'm just talking about scientific facts, right?
yeah, exactly. It mentioned that they conducted this scientific study with users, right? Various drugs, alcohol, various drugs, lists and lists. And they found out, man, that about 80% of these people had a psychiatric diagnosis prior to the dependency.
Exactly.
But what is this study like then? They went to the families. It wasn't just a person, to the families. What was Simon like before all of this? And so on and so on and so on and so on. What were you like, you know? And so on. Man, did you know that if you had been seen by a good psychiatrist, you would have been diagnosed with ADHD?
Let me tell you, many mothers, what I'm going to say, many people don't agree, right? But I have the conception that many mothers and fathers who don't want to medicate their children in childhood, out of fear of medicating the child, I understand the concern, but, well, they want to medicate our children. No, we need to medicate these children to prevent them from being medicated for depression in the future or being medicated and hospitalized for substance dependency.
Suffer less bullying, less trauma.
Suffer less bullying, less trauma. That's it. That's what we need to understand. Because I'm sure that if I had received my treatment, if I had understood, comprehended how I functioned, I wouldn't have gone through as much difficulty as I did.
I might have even learned a lot, but without suffering so much.
Exactly. So yes, dependency is often not the cause, it is the symptom.
Yes. This kind of self-medication. Yes. Depression, anxiety, how people have this, especially men who have, whether they like it or not, there's a pride in seeking treatment.
Yes, man.
Then they turn to gambling, to drinking, which gives that relief.
Exactly. Doctor, I turned to drinking because, you see, I was shy. The guy would give me a nudge. I couldn't approach the girls. I couldn't close a deal. That's it. Perfect.
When I drank, I felt fine, but
I also drank when I was a teenager. Oh, Dr. Felipe. So much so that I had alcohol poisoning at 15, right? From 20 to 16. Why? Because ADHD is also that guy who, if you tell him, let's go, it's time to leave. He says, go where? No, I want more.
No, stopping right.
He just wants to keep going. He has no limit. And then imagine the guy who was shy, who had difficulties, the guy who always wants more. I ended up I went into alcohol poisoning already at 15. Girls, young women who suffer from ADHD, they get pregnant earlier. It's proven. At 15, 16 years old,
Statistical.
3 times more sexually transmitted diseases.
True.
This is not me saying it, it's research, right? We are talking, look how crazy this is. A study conducted on the prison population in England.
Those who go to prison are generally sicker.
It proved that 25% had ADHD.
Wow.
Because it's an individual who often doesn't finish school, will start working informally, will experiment with substances.
Kicked out by family, remember?
Kicked out by the family, will fall into marginality, into criminality. So we are talking about a disorder that is not a public health issue, but also a public safety issue.
For sure, man.
Crazy.
Totally. Yeah, what you said wow, I'm even going to ask you. On one hand, we already have people who keep going online, looking up ADHD symptoms to justify that their child isn't poorly behaved, but rather sick, when in reality, it's a lack of educational boundaries. We have this, in quotes, this pushing the narrative that someone is sick, but this doesn't dismiss the real fact that there are many people, maybe your child, who have ADHD, and you want this story of, oh, I'm not going to give these controlled medications and swap one dependency for another. That's not it. Even because we would be talking about, oh, but I've heard this, man. Right. But if medicine were good, pharmacies in Brazil wouldn't be called drugstores. Oh, please, right? Please. One thing is to have a clean drug, a medication with predictable positive effects, anticipated negative effects, with much more benefit. If you or your child or someone you know has a well-established diagnosis, it will be much better, will live well, avoiding a lot of trauma, just like Simon mentioned. Oh no, let him smoke a joint. Just this week, I saw a mother of a patient, and man, a GAD, right? An anxiety. A secondary generalized anxiety disorder resulting from a crappy life due to having ADHD.
For sure.
And turned to cannabis. Yeah. I evaluated him and said, look, dear mother. And she said, oh, but I don't think it's ADHD. In my consultation, I said, look, we'll find that out, okay? Let me clear the tall grass. Here, which is your anxiety, let's see what's left. And what was left was a huge attention deficit, man. But I told her, until I treat the anxiety, I can't prescribe a psychostimulant. But then at one point when I was going to prescribe no, it has to be a lion's mane. It has to be something. It has to be that thing. I don't know what.
What lion's mane, man? It's like turmeric. I don't know. It's some stuff that people sometimes ask for that isn't proven, that they think will replace the medication.
And even if it partially reduces inflammation, it's not going to perform the miracle you think it will.
Oh, no. That's right. That's why it's called a supplement, right? No, it won't play the role that medication does for the individual. And we know that ADHD medications are the most effective in psychiatry.
Exactly. With benefits and enormous risks.
Exactly. Do you understand? So nowadays, we need to demystify this issue of medication. Treatment, not only to break prejudices, but also to make it clear that it's not just the medication that solves everything.
Exactly.
The medication is not a magic pill. I took the medication and it solved everything.
It gives solving things.
I like to say that medication, Felipe, is like the training wheels on a bicycle. Why do you use the training wheels on a bicycle? To be a support, a help for you to learn how to ride a bicycle.
To have balance.
The medication comes into play when an individual's life is disorganized, when they have no routine, can't get moving, and everything is in complete chaos. What does it come in for? To regulate the production of neurotransmitters so that I can start moving, set priorities, focus, establish a minimal routine. And from there, change my habits, behavior, and lifestyle. A person with ADHD will only be able to change their habits, lifestyle, and behavior with medication.
And it's so interesting. I've seen many.
And then look at this. And after they manage to change their habits and behavior with medication, then we remove the medication. What people often want to do is, no, I'm going to start going to the gym every day. I'm going to start waking up earlier. I'm going to create a routine. I'm going to do this, study, do that without medication. They can't do it. They can't perform. They won't be able to deliver. And they don't create the habit. They don't change their lifestyle. And there are others who take the medication and just sit back and say, no, now fix it. That doesn't work either. So we need to understand that the treatment for ADHD works with these three gears together: behavior and lifestyle changes, medication, and psychotherapy. Because it is within psychotherapy that I will look at all those monsters and demons I have built throughout my life, and I will face them one by one, one by one, one by one, one by one. And I will, in their medicated, changing my lifestyle for the first time, do this here. Look, who I am and what is disorder. Because everything is mixed up. When I take medication, when I change my lifestyle, when I change my behavior, and I do psychotherapy, what do I regulate? What is dysfunctional? What is disorder? And what remains is who I am.
And the person usually realizes that it's not something, the worst, the family. It's not the black sheep.
It's not.
Wrong one family.
And here's the detail. It's not about you stopping being who you are. It's about you understanding how you function and being medicated, changing your lifestyle. Because, folks, if you look at me and you think, I have the life of someone who wasn't neurodivergent. No. I sleep later, but I wake up later. I know my flow moments when I will be much more productive, how to be more productive. I know what works, what doesn't work. So I do all this, but it's not that I want to adapt my life to be a person who functions as if they didn't have a disorder. It's so I can perform despite the disorder. And using my disorder and the way I function, I'll change that. Because using the disorder romanticizes the disorder. And using the way I function to my advantage. That's it.
Then it's true. There are patients that I see with ADHD. They are already very advanced, who have put into practice with psychotherapy, change, diet, physical activity, and so on. Yeah, doctor, at the beginning, when I was only taking the medication, it didn't work as well as it does now.
Of course.
So I tell them, do you see how important it is to sleep, eat well, and exercise? Because the reuptake of dopamine and norepinephrine, depending on the medication, to reuptake well, you have to produce. To produce well, you have to exercise, sleep, and eat well. Otherwise, the medication has nothing to work with.
It doesn't work.
Then after some time, hey, doctor, did you know that there are days when I don't use the medication and I function better?
That's right.
Because you see, I hadn't noticed. I had difficulty due to my ADHD in performing categorical, systematic, procedural tasks. Sitting still, doing just one thing that I don't like. But I know it's important to stay for a while. I had difficulty and I still have this type of responsibility. A businessman who does it like this, then on the day, I have to do an analysis, do analytical, financial work in the company and so on. On that day, I do my treatment. But when I have to have a creativity meeting, a brainstorm, when no one can find a solution to a problem, I don't even take medication because I know my mind works in an atypical, divergent way and will bring a solution for everyone.
And we have to learn exactly that, to use this different way of functioning to our advantage. If I know that I have difficulty sitting in the office from 8 to 18 hours, then I can't expect to perform at the peak of my full potential there. I can't. And then it's no use taking medication, adopting a new lifestyle, psychotherapy, and staying in that environment from 8 to 18 hours. You might be a bit more flexible, but you'll end up getting sick from other things. That in the same way. You won't function in the way you can be. Treating a disorder is not about you ceasing to be who you are. It's about you being able to understand how you function Accept that. And acceptance is not about looking and saying, oh, I'm like this, it's all fine. It's about looking at yourself with pride in who you are, in the way you function, understanding that you deserve respect, understanding that you can indeed reach unimaginable places that you dream of.
Functioning in your own way. You know, there are people who think, think about adults. Unfortunately, many people still get diagnosed with ADHD in adulthood. That was my case. Oh, ADHD just appeared now. No. If it's really ADHD, if you've always had it, it's just that now with the level of education, you should have gone to a decent professional, right? Exactly. The diagnosis was made. Because this thing about it just appearing now, that's not it. Even the exclusion criterion, it's the exclusion criterion. Then the person, but there are people who, despite the diagnosis, think it's a sign of weakness, man. What do you have to say to those people who say, oh, I'm not going to take these things. I am the way I am. This is a sign of weakness. What do you have to say to adults who could, from what they're hearing now, take responsibility? But yeah,
I know what that is because this week a situation happened. Fernando is here. He won't let me lie. And I sent him a message due to a situation that happened. And I said, man, I'm not well. And I feel weak. Every time I, with the knowledge I have, find myself in a situation like this, a 32-year-old man sending a message to a friend to say that I'm not well. And much more than that, I often have to look and say, today I can't be alone. Today I will need to go to a friend's house. I feel weak, I told him. I'm ashamed, but I know I need to say this and I need to ask for help. We feel weak because men, especially men, are not supposed to cry. Men are not supposed to be afraid. Men, they simply have to know how to do what? They have to take all the problems that are happening, throw them on their chest, and say, I can do it. Carry it silently and solve it. This is toxic masculinity.
Deceptive, fragile.
Deceptive, fake. Because no one here is talking about being a victim, about wallowing in self-pity. I didn't put myself in a victim role and wallow in self-pity with him. I spoke, I admitted, I said, I feel weak. But the I feel weak wasn't because I was weak. It was because we live in a world that judges a person who suffers from a disorder, which I do. Yes, I have difficulty with emotional regulation. Yes, if something happens and that something affects me, it will affect me much more strongly than it affects a person who doesn't have the disorder. Yes. Yes, due to my entire history, certain situations in my life can indeed put me in a position to have a relapse. Yes. And I function in this way. I have these situations and all this context of comorbidity. So weakness is when I don't recognize that there will be times when I will need to ask for help, because we understand that the fact of falling and asking for help, of me being a 32-year-old man, of me being a reference in mental health, I think then that I know how to solve everything on my own. First and foremost, I am human. First and foremost, I fall, I feel I can cry like anyone else. And crying is not synonymous with being a victim in self-pity. No, I can cry. But at the same time, I can dust myself off, say I need help, get up and turn things around. Because if I don't do that, you know what happens? I fall back into drugs. I end up using again for 2 days and I fall. And then I fall into a depression. And then soon I'm back to my addiction. And then soon I've lost my business, lost my family, lost relationships, ruined everything because I didn't know how to recognize that it's human to ask for help.
It's not weakness. It's not a lack of masculinity.
it's a lack of prudence. It's because of
excessive pride.
exactly. And we have to understand that it's all right. I can ask for help. I can cry. I can be vulnerable. This is not about being weak. Weak is being so proud to the point of thinking I can solve it alone and then fall and lose everything. And in reality, this weak person, poor thing, was weak trying to be strong. In his mind, he was doing the right thing.
You don't need to live like that.
You don't need to.
It even reminded me of the Apostle Paul. When I am weak, then I am strong. Because he recognized the need to depend on God, to seek help.
The Apostle Paul has a passage that is wonderful because he says exactly this. He says, God, because the good I want to do, I do not do. And the evil I so much reject, I repeat. Something like that? Exactly. Why? Because the human being, he lives exactly this incongruence. We live all the time wanting, yes, to improve and such, but then we get into the more Christian part. We have within our DNA the fallen DNA of sin. And this DNA, it is within it's our instinct. It will pull us. And if I don't understand that, I have this thorn in the flesh like Paul did. Lord, deliver me from this sin. Take me out of this here. And God looked at him and said, I can't take it away from you because if I remove this thorn in the flesh, you will forget about me. I need you to feel every day, to suffer every day, to fall on your knees every day, so you remember that I am here. Otherwise, I truly lose you. I love you so much that I can't take it away. So the human being has to have this thing, and it's very crazy because this is what puts us in total dependence on God.
As much as asking for help may hurt someone, it's this pain that protects you. So like you guys are saying, waiting for God to perform a miracle. No one is saying that. God chooses people to give them the role of an angel in your life as you seek help to lighten your burden. You said we have to carry the cross, but Jesus said our burden is light. Actually, it's his burden because when you carry your cross with him, along with those he prepares to take care of you, this cross, this burden, starts to become light.
Exactly, but it's, you're going through a situation and you say, I'm at peace with this because I trust. I'm at peace with this because I understood. You don't
need to solve it alone.
No. I can trust, I can wait. And then it's about having people in your life who really bring you this stability, because there are people too. And we need to have maturity for this, but that's a topic for another conversation, to be able to identify these people. Why? Because there are people who are mean, there are people who take advantage, there are people who are abusers.
Opportunistic.
And we also need to be careful about knowing how and with whom I will allow myself to be vulnerable.
Even in this, treatment helps.
Even in this, treatment helps, because when you know yourself, when you undergo treatment, when you develop maturity, you start to develop a more critical view regarding this. And you don't accept just anyone in your life, because what can you do to resolve your issues? It's not alone that I meant, you understand? But there are things that will be. There are things that will be. It's not with everyone that you will. But yeah. So when you ask me that, right? Yeah, no, it happens. I felt weak. I told him, I said, I feel weak when I have to send a message and say, I'm not okay.
But I am strong when I accept help.
Yeah, but there I understand that in reality, I am being strong then. Yeah. When it passes, when you look and say, wow, thankfully I managed, because I live alone and sometimes with all the anxiety, intrusive thoughts, malicious people who put pressure on certain things, a person who suffers in a divergent way, they they start to enter a rumination of thoughts. And then suddenly I'm walking, I'm pacing back and forth. And then, yes, I have difficulty regulating myself emotionally if I don't sometimes have someone who says, hey, hold on, sit here. Let's bring clarity to what you're saying. Then look, bam, bam, bam. I start seeing that it's not like that. And I say, damn, man, thanks. There, I dealt with it. But if I don't understand that at that moment, if I don't have the maturity to say that I can cry, that I can ask for help without it being self-pity and victimization. If I don't understand this dynamic, I'll want to be strong and I'll resolve it in another way. A dependency, alcohol, and so on.
Worse. That's cool. And about this other topic I mentioned, about people not making an effort, not organizing their routine, not exercising, and almost hoping to have ADHD and the medication doing this. It's absurd because cognitive doping, some do it, of course.
It's absurd because, man, if we start to look, let's get into technical data, okay? It's known that only, 5% of the population will have ADHD to begin with.
5 out of 100, right? It is like 70 out of 100.
Yeah, nowadays everyone has it. Nowadays everyone has it because of some things. First, it became cool to have a disorder. Is ADHD cool? ADHD is cool. It's a superpower. There are psychiatrists who say it's like a Ferrari.
It's not. It's more like a Herbie.
People with ADHD are more creative. Guys, some people say that those with ADHD are special beings and have a connection with who knows what. It's such nonsense that I see. It's more like it's a way to romanticize. ADHD is a neurobiological disorder, period, with some advantageous skills. It's not about, that's the thing. When people talk about ADHD bringing a competitive advantage, I disagree.
Doesn't it bring any?
No. Do you know why? Because if we look, okay, Simon has a lot of energy, Simon this, Simon that. All right? You see a fraction of my life. When you look at the whole context, the drawbacks I have and the effort I have to keep myself minimally functional, it's very difficult. But obviously, if I understand how I function, undergo the correct treatment, channel my energy, my motivation, of course, a motivated ADHD individual will perform much better in their functions than a non-ADHD individual who is motivated. Why? Because it's simple. You just have to think. What is the issue with ADHD? It's a dysregulated production of dopamine. When an ADHD individual is motivated, what is happening? They are having a dysregulated production, an excess of dopamine. It's a production that a person without ADHD wouldn't have. So that's why individuals with ADHD, when they get involved in a project, it has to be an intrinsic motivation. It has to make sense. It has to make their eyes shine. That by being self-driven, you go, and man, you do it. Man, you build bold. Dare. But here's the thing. They are a hurricane. If there's no one organizing, someone saying, hey, breathe, take a pit stop, they go all out. So it's not, you can't romanticize it. ADHD individuals are more creative. Okay, they can indeed be more creative. But hey, have you ever wondered why ADHD individuals are more creative? It's not because they are born creative. It's because, look, when I look at this podcast here, when I saw, let's change. When I looked at people in my school sitting in their chairs learning, I would look and ask myself, why can't I learn sitting under the table? Why can't I learn walking back and forth? Because when I looked at the model in which people learned, I couldn't learn and function like them. So do you know what I had to do? I had to go home, take all the material I had already seen at school, write it on a whiteboard, speak out loud, and walk back and forth explaining to an invisible audience. That's how I learned. So when you look at me, you say today that your communication skill, of course, since my childhood, I've been giving talks to an invisible audience. That's how I learned. So look at this. Why creative? Because I had to create a new way to learn what other People learn in a simple way. What is easy for others to grasp, I had to look at and say, it's very complicated for me. So I'll have to create a different way from everyone else to achieve the same result they do, but it's costly. It's costly. That's why we are creative. That's why we can solve problems in the blink of an eye. That's why we love chaos, because it's very crazy. I used to work for an event. I loved it.
It's because events are chaos.
When things went wrong, look, I presented a play, right, at the end of the year. Yeah, everything went wrong, even before the play.
And that's good for you, right?
Everyone was going crazy, and I was like, look, leave it to me. Easy, old man, I don't know how to explain it to you. Because I organize myself and find peace in chaos. Too much silence. I need that because I can handle it, right? When I say chaos, folks, I'm not talking about a messy house, because a messy house will only worsen your disorder. I'm talking about moments that demand a resolution from you. Something, I function. No, and here's the detail as well. I, Simon, with ADHD, have this way of functioning. There are people with ADHD who don't. Similarly, some people say people with ADHD are creative. No, it's dangerous to say that, because there are people with ADHD who aren't creative and people don't take them seriously. So when I say this, it's not because I'm pessimistic. It's because in reality, I want to bring responsibility to the way people view the disorder, so that with responsibility, they accept who they are. They start to play their role in the best way in society, in the spaces they are in, and they start to be happy. Without wanting to paint the picture that I have a superpower, which I don't. I'm a human being with difficulties like many others. And I start to look at it with responsibility, bib mump, and without. This thing of, he accepts me, I don't know what. Neither victimhood nor stardom, right? It's not, folks, when this issue of everyone having to accept me is very dangerous. Because with the individual who suffers from a psychiatric disorder, Felipe, I like to say that the disorder deals 3 blows to the person. 3 blows. The first blow is related to the symptoms. For example, inattention, hyperactivity, emotional dysregulation, bipolar disorder. The symptoms that the disorder brings are the first blow. The second blow is the stigmas crazy. It's true, lazy. It doesn't want anything. Bum. The third blow is a mindset you develop due to all this conception and stigma you've created over your life, because if I'm lazy, I don't need to try hard. Why? I can't learn. If I can't sit still, I won't. I won't be able to. I won't even try. So I start to develop a negative mindset. Yes, that puts me in a position of victimhood and self-pity. Oh, I feel sorry for myself. I'm suffering. I'm unable. I don't do it. And unintentionally, you enter a state of self-pity and victimhood, which is very difficult to escape from. So, because of what? I'm not blaming these people. Because of those 2 blows I mentioned. Because of the stigmas, because of the symptoms, he thinks he is that. And for him to get out of that mindset, it's very difficult. Many people ask me like this, I wish I hadn't been born with the disorder I have. Then sometimes they think I'm insensitive when I say, man, you were born, so what? The issue is not what I was born with. It's not the issue, it's not about it's not about what I was born with. The issue is not my ADHD.
What?
The issue is, how am I going to use the tool I have? Because if I keep focusing only on the ADHD, that I'm inattentive, that I have emotional dysregulation, that I'm hyperactive, that I talk too much, that I interrupt people. I can improve all of that, but if I only focus on the fact that I have difficulty getting into motion, that I jump from task to task, that I'm not organized, I'll look at the person who has all of this and will always want to be like that. And I'll keep looking at myself and saying, wow, what a mess. I wanted to be the other person and I can't, but this is how I am. There's no way around it. So I have to look at myself and say, okay, fine, I am all of this. What can I do with this? Because here's the thing, man, I'm going to die this way. When I say die this way, it's not the Gabriella syndrome. Born this way, can we improve? Yes, with treatment, with psychoeducation, right? By developing maturity. But I function this way. So instead of stomping my foot, oh God, oh unjust world, the world is very unfair to people who have, the world is unfair to everyone. Everyone has a struggle, deals with their disorder. Some people have the struggle of not having an arm. Some people have the struggle of losing a child, sometimes inside a palace. That's it. So that's your struggle. My friend, take your struggle, look at it and say, all right.
And now, what can I do with this? Since, and very likely, this will be something frequent in the life of someone with ADHD. You become so skilled at finding a way at the moment that it seems
that's also a danger.
Because then, in times when you need to be more creative, you're so trained in doing that, no, guys, let's go, it'll work.
Yeah, that's also a danger. Right? A danger. It's dangerous because you
generate an excess of confidence, leaving everything for later.
Yeah, we procrastinate. And there will be a day when that last minute won't be enough. You'll miss deadlines, make mistakes, slip up.
I hear from some parents who say, oh, doctor, I don't think my child has ADHD. I say, oh, really? Why? Oh, because with 3 or 4 hours left before the exam, he gets so desperate that he goes, studies, and does well on the test.
That's addictive. Addictive. Because at the last minute, you already, let's think about it like this. Look, it's that individual who starts, oh, there's a wedding that you look at the time, there's no time. Then if there's half an hour left, you're like, oh my gosh. You put on the suit, the tie, get in the car, speed up the car and overtake. And pow, the light is turning red. You speed up more and go through. Ooh. And you're like, wow, I'm going to make it. And you're there. You arrive, get in with 1 minute and 60 seconds to spare. And you're like, wow. Thank God it worked out. Oh, it even gives you a rush. Because so much adrenaline is released that there's a device with an effect similar to dopamine.
Yes.
And you get into that, and it's extremely addictive.
Dangerous.
Next time, if it happens, you won't leave with half an hour to spare. You'll leave with 15 minutes to spare.
And then the light turns red.
Exactly. You go through and crash the car, arrive late, and it doesn't work out because it's fun. It's not that it's fun. It's addictive, the risk. So it's madness, because when I start talking about this, there are people who don't realize why they love to arrive. Because there's the guy gets in, the guy speeds up, the guy goes like this. Ta 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 ta. Imagine if he had to organize himself, plan, stop at the light, arrive with time to spare. Oh, he's already here like this, quiet. Why did I often love my life like this? Leaving one thing and going to another and going to another and going to another, getting on a flight, running out and getting into an Uber. Because that was extremely addictive adrenaline. But this, you change the type of drug. Exactly. There's also that. But it reaches a point where you enter into chaos and disorder, because those who are close, let's also take the Bible, right? When God came, God's principle was order. Look at what he says. Let there be heaven, earth, land, sea. He puts order into what is in disorder. The foundation for a human being, for a human to develop with maturity, with self-responsibility, to find their direction and center, is order. That's why many people with ADHD say, oh, I don't like routine. But routine is freedom. Routine is what brings you order. It's having a time to wake up, a time to sleep, a time to eat, at least that, a time to pray, to do physical activities. I'm not saying to have everything perfect, like those life routine coaches with extraordinary routines, waking up at 5:30 in the morning and so on and so forth. I struggled a lot with that, trying to follow those rituals and not lasting even 2 weeks. Then I understood, in reality, do I have more crappy days or more extraordinary days? Getting into context here, right? I have more wonderful days, okay, folks? Because I am very grateful to God. But it's more about the difficult days that I want to talk about. The day when you visualize the best day of your life, an extraordinary day. My friend, I have to visualize the worst day of my life. Why the worst day of your life? Because here's the thing. When I visual on my worst day, what's the minimum I will be able to do? Because the only certainty I have is that I will fail. It even seems like those photos before the national competition, right? To have a laugh. The only certainty in life is that you will fail. Yes, because the human being is a constant little creature.
If you have this anticipated, you dedicate yourself more.
Exactly. If I have it planned for the worst day, when I don't want to get out of bed, can't do anything, what will be my minimum? My minimum will be to do this and that. That's the skill, because today we live in an excess of productivity. A romanticism about being the best, this and that. It seems like everyone is super productive. It's an expectation, runs a triathlon, takes cold showers, reads 500 books a week. The societal demand to be a superhero is increasingly putting people in a conflict with mental health. It's making everyone more anxious, terrified. The person performs, the person is productive, but they think they are not. Why? Because they created a recipe that who said it was made for you, and then you try to fit your life and adapt to it. Then you can't do it and you get frustrated. Then you feel like a loser, you feel worthless.
Whoever wants to follow a recipe will end up being sliced one day. Period. That's it.
And I turned the game around when I understood that. Because when I started especially producing content about ADHD, I thought in the following way: for people to believe in me, to see truth in me, in what I preach and what I deliver. They need to see a man who seems not to have ADHD. Because they will see that I have won, that I have overcome. No. Yeah. Why? Because first I got frustrated because I couldn't do everything that a person without ADHD does. I failed, I made mistakes, I slipped up. So much so that my first online course I created, can you believe I didn't deliver it?
You didn't deliver it?
I did a live session, sold some courses, and then I didn't deliver them on time because I couldn't organize myself. I was alone, right? Deliver, edit the videos. In that one I did, I had 44 students. I called each one of them, apologized, explained why I couldn't do it. And then do you know what happened? They liked me more because I admitted it. I spoke my truth. And as someone with ADHD, I really couldn't organize myself and didn't deliver. Do you understand? I'm not saying I did the right thing, okay, folks? I'm saying that it happened. And then people started, when I began to say that there were really days when I didn't feel like doing anything. Like, guys, today it didn't happen. Today my physical activity was doing a push-up. Nothing more, because I did the push-up next to the bed. It's what I call a mini habit, right? It's just a little thing. It became light. And then do you know what happened? Since I did this now, I managed to become consistent. That's why I've been doing what I do for 5 years. I haven't quit. And then, because of this, people began to follow me much more because everyone is tired of people laying down the law.
And man, and especially on the internet, there's no point in trying to deceive. There are some false moralists, but there's no point in trying to deceive Simon. I tell people, if there's one good thing that the internet brought, one of them, right? It's the sense for falseness. The follower and the subscriber, they notice when you're trying to project an image that isn't real. It doesn't connect with people.
Be who you are. I'm not saying it's for you. Do you understand what I told you? Yes, yes. I'm not saying that I continued as a person, except I said how interesting. And it was thanks to us having this approach that today I am a guy who trains every day. I have a successful company. I became an authority. I'm invited to participate in interviews with people like you. I sit in places and with people I never imagined I could. Why? Because I was true to the way I function. I didn't try to make extraordinary changes in my daily life. One here, another there. There are days when it won't work. I come back the next day. I have a phrase that I live by, which is 1 day, fine, 2 days, never. Why? Because 1 day, it's okay for me to stay in bed. 1 day, it's okay not to get up, not to leave the room, right? Not wanting to talk to anyone. But 2 days, never. And when I say 2 days, never, it's not the coach talk that the next day you go and conquer the world. No. Yes. When I say coach talk, folks, it's against those stage speakers, okay? Because there are coaches who do very good and serious work. But that's not the talk here. 1 day it's okay. The next day you go there and get up and do it. No. It's that the next day I have to at least get out of my room. Do a push-up. Brush my teeth. Do you understand? So 2 days. It's never that the next day I have to at least see the minimum I can possibly do to be a little beyond where I was. 1 day, it's okay to say today nothing. Now 2 days, the next day, can we take a smaller step at least? Let's go. It's like that old story. When I look at my room is messy. I say, my God, there's so much mess to clean up. I'll just close the door. I don't look, right? No. Open the door. At least take the sock that's in the corner. Just that. Then you go there and you put away a t-shirt. It's not just about organizing the whole room.
It's about starting. It's just about giving a little bit. This is very important. So there's no expectation that it's all at once.
It's not all at once. And the big issue is that humans don't know how to live with the factor of unpredictability. They don't like routine, but they don't want unpredictability. But they don't know. When unpredictability appears, we become completely terrified. We don't know how to deal with it. We don't know how to deal with it. We run away. We are anxious and despair. And the real world, life, it is a succession of unpredictability, one after the other. Stability does not exist. It does not exist. What I can have is order. It's different. It's true. It's order. Order. I can have that. And the greatest blessing, do you know what I want? It's when you embrace unpredictability. Embrace it. Learn to embrace unpredictability. If you have order, you can go with the flow. The problem is when everything is in disorder, then unpredictability disappears. It throws you into chaos, and then you fall, you mess up.
And it's an excellent motivation. It's starting to fall in love with the ability to bring order to what is in disorder. In English, disorder is disorder, right? It's the disorder. So when you bring order to chaos, chaos becomes chaos.
It's the mix of order.
And go on.
And I tell everyone who has a disorder that it is. What is the minimum amount of order you can start to bring into your life every day? Then it begins.
And it's a lie. Oh, but it doesn't make sense. It's so little. It makes sense.
It makes a lot of sense. I started training by doing 1 push-up. It's real. I started reading 1 page a day. The minimum. I am the king of the minimum. The minimum. What is the minimum I can do? Always the minimum. Then there are days when I pick up and read 1 page. I read 2. I say, wow, I read double. Dopamine. But if I set out to read 10, I read 12, and I say, wow, I only read 2.
And learn to celebrate.
I set out to read 1.
And, learning to celebrate small achievements is something transformative.
It's about falling in love with the process. I understood that the dopamine that works best for me is the dopamine from the final result of the process. It's when I'm training, I pass by the mirror and I see a little vein on my arm. I say, wow, man, there's a little vein there. Look, wow. With the chiseled abs. The fun began and it was like this. It's the process. And It's very interesting. If you take Ecclesiastes, Solomon says, right? In Solomon's militia, and Solomon, he seems somewhat unmotivated. He made me feel a bit depressed at one point, right? In Ecclesiastes, because he says that nothing makes sense under the sun. But it's very interesting that Solomon says in Ecclesiastes that yes, under the sun, everything is vanity. And the term vanity, people think it's vanity in the sense of trivial things. No. Vanity comes from mist, from vapor. Isn't that right? So it's very interesting because here we are constantly seeking what? Seeking what we do not yet have. In the eagerness for what we don't have and in the eternal boredom of already having. So we live in the eagerness. I have it. I'm bored. I want more. I'm bored. I want more. I'm bored. And we live in this dopaminergic loop of life, in this mist. And we move away from this intrinsic motivation, from what makes sense, from what truly transcends, because what he talks about is what is under the sun. So, if it is what is under the sun, which is vanity, I have to seek what is above the sun. And that's where you can understand. That's where it becomes easy. That's where it becomes easy. Because it's not just about seeing what is under the sun, it's about seeing what is above. It's about seeing what is beyond. As long as I seek motivation, the answer to everything that is here is, it will work out. I will live in this yearning. It's Schopenhauer who says this. It's the eternal search for what I don't have and the yearning for what I still don't have, right? And the boredom of possessing. That's it. And then what I was saying, that Solomon brilliantly, he says that the only thing man has on earth is to eat, drink, have fun, and enjoy the fruits of your labor. It's about having fun. He's saying, my brother, everything here is variety. You go to the same place. It doesn't matter if you are wise. Of course, wisdom, he says it reduces difficulty. But at the end of the day, it amounts to the same thing. The only thing you have here under the sun, do you know what it is?
Enjoy, eat, drink, and have fun from your work without being a slave to pleasure.
Without being a slave to pleasure. Right?
Otherwise, you end up in the prison of hedonism, Schopenhauer again.
Because people don't. Solomon was a wise man because he had everything at its peak. He says that I gave myself everything my eyes desired. It's not the guy who never had anything. It's the guy who had everything. He didn't have just one man. He had 1,000 women. He had everything. He said, I desired alcohol and went after alcohol, drank, went after drugs, used drugs, had every kind of wealth you can imagine. And still he said, I didn't find the answer.
Vanity, vanity. And it's interesting in this part, under the fleeting heel of vanity, I interpret a lesson about detachment. And a teaching about enjoyment.
It's about enjoyment, that's what I said.
It's the finger of Aroba and the finger of God. Detachment leads you to God, detachment from material things. But then when the other guy here, it's about this pleasure.
So, but this pleasure is not enjoyment in any possible way.
No.
It's you surrendering to your instinct to try to fill something that will always be lacking. It's seeking an answer for something that has no answer here in everything under the sun.
Absolutely, without a doubt. Exactly, indeed.
And here it is. I'm going to tell you something crazy now, because this is about mental health. But I'm sure that much of the anxieties people have today, in reality, is due to not understanding this functioning of the human being who lives in search and yearning, in desire for what they don't have, and in the eternal boredom of possessing, because that's the big catch. And that's why, going back to the Christian side, sin is so attractive. Because sin promises you to deliver something, but when it delivers, you realize it wasn't that. It charges you. You go back and you feel something. So in reality, that's the illusion of sin. It promises to deliver something to you that will answer your desires, your yearnings, what you most long for. But when you have it, and then you enter this cycle. And that's the mist. That's the mist of man. That's vanity. It's the eternal search for what one already has. Boredom. So what do? I want the next one. I want the other one. And do you know what you lived? You lived an entire life without enjoying it.
Exactly. And one abyss calls another. And there are people who sometimes use this part from Ecclesiastes. Oh no, but at some point there will be time. Because it is written in the Bible that there is a time for everything. There is a time for every purpose.
Not for everything you think. So I flipped. When I understood all this, when I started looking at life this way, I was coming back home in an Uber. And then I heard a song, and the lyrics made me reflect on the life I was living. I was living in an apartment, in a neighborhood I never imagined. I had just premiered a play at the most traditional theater in Sao Paulo with full capacity. I had just sold and received $1 million investment in my company. I already had 500,000 followers. And when I started to realize this, I stopped. I looked and said, if you had told me all this 4 years ago, I would have laughed in your face because I am already living what I always dreamed of. And it's so interesting that I didn't realize it. Then when I reached what I always dreamed of, I looked and said, something is missing.
It's dangerous, right?
It wasn't the answer. I said, hey, look how crazy. It's not really about that.
And it seems like demagoguery, I don't know, for those who haven't reached it. I say this with all the truth in my heart. It's true. There are people who say, doctor, but I wish I were in so-and-so's shoes. I said, look, I wish I had this, had that. I said, look, maybe you will have, maybe not. Certainly, if you think you need to have something to be happy, you will have something that I guarantee you. The conclusion that you are even emptier than before. You lost time, stress, good relationships in pursuit of that. Not that it's wrong to prosper. No, Gui is saying that because in my view, to prosper, it's not just a financial matter. Resources with peace, with enjoyment.
Of course.
And sometimes there's a prosperous person who earns very little but enjoys the company of a spouse, the children, the little they have, and someone multimillionaire would like to trade places with this person who, despite being rich, is poor.
Exactly. It's that old story. Sometimes we, as Christians, often look at the church and say that the blessed one is the brother who arrives in a fancy car or who bought the apartment, top floor penthouse. And we look at the sister who is on the bus coming home. But she who preached to the neighbor when the neighbor was down and the neighbor converted, she who helped her. We think she is not blessed because we have conditioned being blessed to be related to what? To prosperity. In fact, how many courses have you seen about Solomon's millionaire codes? As if Solomon were the man. Most blessed by God? Was he? He was. When we talk about prosperity, but he ended his life. Look at what we are saying about Solomon. He prostituted himself with more than 1,000 women, lay with women from other nations, worshipped other gods, and corrupted God's principles. He was the pinnacle and the height of everything that was not supposed to be done. And we look at him as a reference. We like to quote Proverbs, but no one wants to read Ecclesiastes. Do you understand? Wretched that I am. Why? Because we do exactly what Solomon says not to do, which is to place our validation, our hope, simply in that which is material, in what is under the sun, in financial prosperity. And I'm not preaching against prosperity.
Yes.
I am prosperous, thank God.
Both can be blessed.
Both. It's just that when my purpose is that, the answer isn't there.
If your heart is there, if your treasure,
it's your idol. It can't be your idol. The big realization was when I understood the following. What is the thing I have? More fear of losing. If I lose it, I was very afraid of losing. I thought about what I had built on the internet. If I lost it, could I manage to do something else? If Instagram stops today, I won't lose. I had a fear. And I didn't realize that there I would say, my God, what will happen? I would get anxious if something happened. If God comes to me and says, stop now, I won't take anything else.
I say, for the love of God.
If I can speak calmly, what now, Lord? This, then it's a hassle. I like to say this because in reality, that's when you find your peace, your stability, your order. You stop being. Of course, we are human. We get anxious, we get worried, but you stop living. You stop living in dependence on that.
I've even said it before. I like it a lot. This is a discernment from God. When you talk about this structure of Schopenhauer, it's the pendular movement of life, but it's an invisible prison.
Exactly. It's a fog.
It's that you become dependent on this pleasure, boredom, satisfaction, dissatisfaction, and the dependency. Wow. Then one day thinking about this, I said, but all dependency is bad. Then in my mind, I believe it was the Holy Spirit, that not all dependency is bad. No, there is a dependency.
It's the dependency on Him.
It's on God. When you stop leaning, you become a hostage to things. The sun rises from beneath the earth and you start leaning towards what is above the sun. You become an independent person and the world can't hold you back anymore.
No, exactly, because nothing shakes you anymore. You trusted. Who is Simon today? Simon today, I like this question you asked me. Because when you introduced me today, at the beginning, people like to ask you, Creator, it's cool for grown-ups, right? You have so many thousand followers, so many thousand students. It was a bait caught. Yes, yes. But look how interesting. If you take the Bible, again, I think this is the first podcast where I talk so much about the Bible. There is a man that I looked at and felt indignant. He didn't seem very relevant when I read about him. Because I only say one thing about him quickly. I say like this. Enoch walked with God. It's nothing. It doesn't say what he did, what he had. Nothing. But it says the most important thing. Like, he wasn't the ruler of Egypt. No, nobody. But he did something that sometimes with our human perspective, we don't stop to think about. He walked with God. That sums up anything. If you look, the descendants of Cain were great builders. They were this and did. There were many references. Right? Enoch walked with God. Today we want to answer who we are. Define what we do. And that puts us in a prison. Because if Simon is no longer the Simon from TDH for us, great. If Simon is no longer the guy who has 30,000 students, the guy who has millions of followers, who am I? It terrified me. And then when you ask me who I am, the only answer I have for you is that I am a person who is every day trying to identify what really bothers me here on earth, so that I can, in the simplest way possible, when I say simple, it's a guy who is fighting against vanity, against his own ego, because I am vain.
Without distraction.
That's it, without distraction, to simply look and do that. That makes sense to me in a way that respects my values and is aligned with what Christ wants for me. People always ask me this. I've been asking myself this, and Simon didn't exist a few years ago. I have been asking myself, in what way, in anything I do, I can convey Christ. Simon is the person who is seeking this. I'm still far, but I'm seeking.
So you are a little Christ, a Christian.
Exactly. I'm seeking that. So I don't know how to answer yet because I'm in this process of building.
Thinking in the logic of Enoch, Simon is someone who is trying to walk with God.
Exactly. If there was something on my tombstone I wouldn't want you to put, Simon from TDH Protutivo Grande, who participated in the biggest podcast, who has, I don't know how many thousand students. Who was this here? No. If I could ask for one thing, it would say, look, that he tried every day to walk with God.
My God, man. Did it make sense to you? Leave your comments. I won't even ask if you remembered someone while watching, but let this content overflow into that person's life. If you still don't follow Simon on social media, follow him. Handle
Simon.Vega.
I took out the TDH for us, Big.
Because I'm not the TDH for big people, right?
I'm Simon. Simon, thank you very much. I'll leave the link here. Is it on YouTube?
It is too. Then you type Simon Vega, TDH, Pro Gente Grande, and we're there.
Follow Simon. On social media, share this video. If you've made it this far and you're not subscribed to the channel, hit that subscribe button, turn on the bell, because when it rings, I'm sure it's not to bring distraction. It's a transformation for your life. See you in the next episode.
Thanks, dear.